This is the Chapter 21 solution, which is a continuation of the Chapter 20 solution that you were working on. Remember, in Chapter 20, you created the Home Pages app, the Travel Sites app, you created some templates, one for showing all the trips, which when you would click on a button, it would show the word Africa, Asia, Europe, North America, and so forth. And this site will actually continue that project that you worked on. So the first thing you want to do is open up the PSQL, and I just clicked on my Windows Start button and typed PSQL, and go ahead and log into that. And you saw how to do this earlier in previous chapters. And after we log in, we want to create a database. So type the word create database travel semicolon enter, and that will create the database for us. And that's all we want to do in this terminal window. So once that database is created, we can go ahead and close that window and we'll get back to the project. Now in this project you've been working with, which is My Travel, you created these different applications, homepage, travel sites, and templates. Let's open up a new terminal window, and we're going to want to work with Postgres database in this Python Django website. So I need to do a pip install of psycopg2, and that's the Postgres library for working with the databases in a Python Django. Now, if you're working with a Mac, you'd have to say psycopg2 binary. But if in the Windows environment, you're just going to say the psycopg2, which I've already installed that. Another one that you want to install is called Pillow, and Pillow allows you to work with images in Python, images in a database. So go ahead and make sure those two are installed. Once again, I've already installed them. That's why it says the requirements are already satisfied. Now that we created the database, let's go ahead and close our terminal window and let's go to our settings.py file for the project. And in that settings.py file, there's an area called databases. And this is where we want to type in some information for the database that we just created. Instead of using SQLite, we're going to use PostgreSQL. The name of the database is going to be travel. The user will be Postgres, because that's the default user when we installed Postgres. The password, this was the password you created. And if you remember from our tutorial, I had one called superuser123. Make sure you put commas after each one. And the host, in this case, will be localhost because we're storing it on our system. And then we make sure we have the closing curly brace for that, the closing curly brace for that. We have the engine, the name, the user, the password, and the host. And this is the actual database variable name in the dictionary, or that's the key that we're going to use to access this information. Now that we have that information, go ahead and save that file. And the next step will be the creation of the models. Now the models are just data structures that represent data that we're going to work with. In our case, the data will be the tables in the database, and the models will be the source code representation of that data. You can go look at the database schema in section 21.4, and you'll see that we have a customer table, a destination table, a trip category table, and then we have a joining table we call interest, but really we're going to let Postgres handle this for us because we're going to set up a database relationship, and Postgres will create a linking table in a many-to-many relationship. So let's go ahead and start working with models in this project. So the first thing we need to do for this is we need to actually go and modify the models.py file. Now you'll notice that in each of the applications, home pages, and travel sites, we have a models.py file. And you can modify either one of these, it doesn't really matter. We're going to go ahead and modify the models.py file in the travel sites folder. So if you click on models.py, you're going to find out that these are just classes in Python code. The first thing is we import models from the Django.db package. And this gives us access to the models class. And then we just start making the models. Now you have to understand, if we were going to work with these different classes and these classes are dependent upon other classes, you have to make sure that you write the lowest level class first. In other words, if we say that a customer has a destination and a destination has a trip category, we need to do trip category first, then destination, and then customer, because the class can't use another class unless it's already been defined. And that might be something you just learn the more you work with models. But if I just started writing a class for the customer model and said that one of the fields was destination, you'd get an error because it would say that destination doesn't exist. So let's go ahead and write our models. And the very first model that we want to start with will be the trip category. First thing then we type in is the word class, trip category, models from the model class, colon, and now you specify the different attributes. We'll say that trip category has a description field, and it's going to be a models.char field with some max length of 20 characters. I don't have to define an ID field for this table because Python Django will automatically do that for us when we migrate this table over to the database. So you don't have to list ID fields, but every table will have a field called ID, and that will be the unique identifier or primary key for the table. The next thing I'm going to define is the def underscore underscore string underscore underscore self, and this is the method that is called if you ever try to access an object from this table. We're saying that if you ever access an object of trip category, we're going to return the description attribute, that attribute right there. Otherwise, you'd see the word object and it would be some funky thing that doesn't make any sense to you. So that's why we like to include the def underscore underscore string underscore underscore. And you can go read in the chapter more about that. So here's our model for trip category. When we run the migrations to create these tables in the database, it will actually now create a table called trip category with a field called ID, another field called description, which will be a char field with the max length of 20 characters. Let's create our next model. The next model will be the destination model. And we say it's from the models model class, so we've inherited from that. And we want to specify some different attributes. I'm going to paste these attributes in, and then I'll discuss each one with you. So let's take a look at the different attributes. First of all, remember that every table or every model is going to have a field called ID. The system generates that for you. It's a unique identifier and auto-incremented. You don't have to worry about declaring it. This attribute says that every destination record or object will have a field called trip category. This will be a one-to-one relationship with the trip category model, meaning a destination can have a trip category, one and only one. Now, you might think this is different, but what we're saying is if we had a destination for someplace in Africa, we'll say that the destination is a safari. It can be assigned to this category, but there can only be one record assigned to that one category. So if this was an A value and the category was a B value, then we're going to say A can have only one B and B can have only one A. Once again, for a travel site, that might be sort of weird because you would think that you'd have multiple trips to one location, just different areas of that one location. But we're just working with a one-to-one relationship, meaning trip category can have one link back to this destination record, and the destination record has one link to the trip category. You'll understand this more when we start entering data. This says that if you ever delete this record, you should delete the other models, the trip categories record. Now, if you don't want to cascade that, meaning delete one record, delete all the linked records, you can actually change that. We could even be more specific and say on delete equals, make sure we have a comma there, which now says if we ever delete this record, then make sure we delete the other record. Or you could just say model stat cascade, either one, but this one is more specific, saying only on the delete. So let's go ahead and leave that one for now. This one says we're title field, we're going to be a varchar for 50. Days is an integer field starting at the number 0. Cost will be a decimal field with 8 digits total, including 2 decimal places. Main photo will be an image field, and we're going to upload to a directory called photos. Is active is a Boolean, will default as true. And leave date will be a date field. Now, if you notice, the date field says we don't really understand what this date time stuff is. And so what we need to do is we need to make sure we go up to the top here and we have to bring in the date time and the time delta so that we can use that with our date times. That's going to be our destination model. Now the next thing we want to do on the destination model is just like our other model, we want to write that underscore underscore string that says if you ever try to access an object from this class, we want to see something other than the word object. And we're going to say we want to return the word title. So the title attribute will return. The last class that we want to do will be the customer class. And in the customers class, we want the following attributes. And I'll go ahead and type these in. Let me explain these and then you can type them in. First name will be a varchar for 30, last name varchar for 30, username varchar for 20, password varchar for 20, email will actually be an email field. Now by doing this, that means that when you try to enter in data, it will do some validations for you. It will have the max length of 100. Phone will be a char field with the max length of 100 and it allows empty values in the database. And then destinations will be a many-to-many relationship with the destinations model. And we don't have to have that relationship. But if we do have the many-to-many relationship, if you remember, there should be a joining table. And it should pull the unique key from each of those tables into the joining table. Once again, when you create a table, a model, it automatically adds a field called ID, which is a unique identifier auto-generated int. So when we migrate this to the Postgres database, it should create another table for us, which will be the linking table between destination and customer and pull the ID from each of those fields. The last thing we want to do for this table, this model, is our underscore string. And if you ever try to access an object from this class, we want to see the self dot, and we'll type in full name. Now, if you look closely, you don't have a full name. And so what we can do is we can actually create our own properties in the class. Now, the property is not a field in the table, but instead it's going to be a property associated with the object, but not stored in the database. So by using the @ property, I made a new attribute called full name, which is going to be in the format of string space string, and that format will consist of the first name going into the first S for string, and the second name going into the second S for string. If I had had an I, that'd been an integer, and so forth. And so anytime I access the object from the customer model dot full name, it will go and grab the first name attribute and put a space and then the last name attribute. And we're going to actually display that if they ever access an object from this model. So those are our current models that we have. One other thing we could do is we could write a method. And in that method, we could say if we ever try to save a record for this model, then we're going to say that the first name is equal to self dot first name dot upper. So we're going to force it to uppercase. And we could do the same thing for the last name attribute. So if we ever try to store a first name or a last name, we will convert them to uppercase. And then since we already have a save method out there, because that's associated with every model, we want to make sure we also call the super of the customer class, passing the object we're working with, and then we'll say call the super save. So this will actually save the record, but before we save the record, we'll uppercase the first, uppercase the last, call the existing save method that's already there, working with this model and the current object, which has those two fields uppercased. Let's go ahead and save that, and that's going to be our models. Now that we have our database created, our models created, which each model is a class that's going to refer to a table that will be created in the database. We've specified all the attributes in the database. We've specified what to do when you try to access a record from the database. So rather than returning the word object, you'll see some value. We've specified the relationship between different models. And we've created an attribute or a property, which is not part of the table, but actually will be contained within the object for each class. So in this case, if I ever create a customer record, I'll also have that attribute which grabs the columns from the table, puts them into that format. And then I overrode the save method. So if I ever save a record, I first uppercase those two fields, and then I call the original save method. Now that I have all of that information in place, now we can actually go and tell Python Django to create the tables in the database. Here's how you do it. Open a new terminal window, type in the word Python manage.py, make migrations, and then the app that we're working with, where the models are, and that's Travelsight with an S, Travelsites. Press enter, and it's going to go out and prepare the SQL statements for creating those tables out in the Postgres database. Now take a look at this error message. It said you don't have an app installed called Travelsites. And that's because we never modified our settings.py file to include that second application that we just created. We had the original one of home pages, so we need to open up the settings.py, go to the installed apps, and then we'll say travelsites.apps, And then you need to know what the name of the class is. Here's how you do that. Here's the Travel Sites application. Here's the apps. Here's the name of the class that we're going to work with. So I'm going to copy that class, go back to the settings.py, save that, make sure you put a comma at the end. So I've modified the installed apps for the settings.py, so it should understand who Travel Sites now is in this project. Come back down to here. Let's go ahead and run our make migrations one more time and see if it finds it now. And it said it found it. It's got a model for trip category, a model for destination, and a model for customer. That's now ready to run the generated SQL statements and modify the database. Now, where do you see those generated SQL statements? Within the Travel Sites application, there's a folder called Migrations now, and that's because we ran Make Migrations. Under Migrations, there's a file called 0001 underscore initial.py. Let's take a look at that file. And if you look inside, you'll see that it has different instructions. It says that for the trip category, you're going to create the model that's going to have the fields ID and description. Now, if you remember back over here, we said that it only had description, but I also told you that whenever you create a model, Django adds another field called ID, and that ID field is an auto-generated field and set to be the primary key. And then it's going to create another model called destination. Once again, there's the auto-created ID field plus all of the other fields that we created, and then the customer, an ID field, auto-generated, and its fields. And so it's actually showing what information is going to be used to create these sites. Now let me show you one more thing. I cleared that. I want to type in Python manage.py SQL migrate travel sites 0001, which refers to that file right there. This now shows you the actual SQL statements that are going to be used to modify the database. Let me clear. The way you actually modify the database is you type in Python manage.py migrate. That will say, take all of the migrations you have and apply them to the Postgres database in the settings.py file. So it's running all these SQL statements. If I now open up the pgadmin and take a look inside of our travel database, which when we created it, there were no tables whatsoever. There was nothing there. So let's open up the pgadmin, take a look at it, and see what happened when I ran the make migrations and then applied the migrations with the migrate command. So I'm opening up pgadmin, logging in with that password, come over here to the servers, and let's take a look at the travel database. And remember, here's the database, but to find the tables, you have to go to schemas and tables. It made all of these tables, which this is because we have the admin option automatically built into our website, which we'll see in a minute. Here's the customer model, the destination model, and the trip category model. And if you notice, it added on the application name underscore model name, and this becomes the table name. So here's the trip category, here's the columns, ID and description. The system generated that ID field for us. Here is the destination model, which has ID, title, days, cost, main photo, is active, leave date. And then if you remember, we said that there is a relationship, one-to-one relationship with trip category. So that will hold the trip category ID. Here's the customer model. which is our table that has ID, first, last, username, password, email, and phone. And then if you take a look back over in this model, we said that destination and customer were related. That customer had a destinations field that was a many-to-many. Back in the PG admin, I don't see anything that says destination. But look what the system did. It created the joining table, customer underscore destinations. So it took the customer model name, the destination model's name, added an ID field, which is a unique identifier, and then it brought in the customer ID from the customer table and the destination ID from the destination table. This is your linking table in a many-many relationship, and it automatically created that table for you. So we see that we do have the tables now created based upon the models generated in our Python Django website. And that all happened because we did a make migrations and then we did the migrate. So now we have the website built, the database created, the models created, the tables created based upon the models. Let's see how we can actually work with that data and try to do some adds, inserts, and deletes using the admin tool. Now, in order to use the admin tool, which is automatically built into our application. In fact, if you take a look at the settings.py, there are some things that are automatically brought in for us that allow us to work with admin. The admin right there, authorization, content types, sessions, static files. This is all that allows us to work with an admin capability. The admin capability in Python Django allows you to make an end user that has a secure password. They can log into your website and then they can actually automatically insert records, delete records, edit records, search for records, and work with all the different tables associated with your website. And this is all built in because of admin capability in your system. So what do we need to do if we want to work with that? Open up a terminal window, and the first thing we need to do is say python manage.py create one word super user. And this isn't the super user that you're used to in Postgres. This is be the super user for the Django website admin. What username do you want? You can type in anything you want. I'm going to type in the word admin. Notice the name. That name, when you run it on your system, will be your username for your computer. We're going to say the word admin, email address. Doesn't really matter. I'll say test@test.com. Password. I'm going to type in the word admin again, and then it wants you to duplicate it, and then it gives me a warning and it says, wait a minute, this is way too close to your username. And I'd say, yeah, that is the name. And it's too short, it must be 8 characters, it's too common, there's all these rules. But then if you want, you can just bypass it. Now in the real world, you're not going to bypass it. For this solution, I will. So I'm going to go ahead and have the username and the password be admin, and I'll bypass that requirement. The user has now been created. So the next thing I need to do is I need to actually give Django authorization to work with our tables. I could go ahead and run my terminal right now. I could say python manage.py run server in that terminal window. I could open up the website, and in that website, I could come over here and I could say /admin, enter, and it brings up the login. Admin, admin, login. And all I see are the users associated with the website. I don't see anything with my models. But how cool is that, that you have this admin already built in to your website that you just made? We'll go ahead and log out of that, close that window. We can minimize that. So what we need to do now is we need to make sure that we can actually use the admin capability in this website. So what I need to do is I need to go and modify the admin.py file. Now here's the admin.py file in the travel sites. It has an admin. Home pages, here's home pages, also has an admin, but we're working with the travel sites application right now. Not the project, but the travel sites application. Click on admin, and we need to add some statements. First thing we need to do is we need to let it know who the models are we want the admin to work with. And we're going to import the customer model, the trip category model, and the destination model. Next thing we need to do is we need to say admin.site.register, and then we need to register those models. This is the statement that actually makes the models visible inside of the admin tool. So we'll register all of those models that we want the user to be able to see. And you don't have to put them all in there if you don't want them to have it. It's up to you. We have capability. So let's save that again. And now that we've registered the models inside of the application, now I can go back to the terminal window, run the website, access the website, access the admin capability by typing /admin, log in with the username. Remember the super user I made was admin and admin. And now it actually shows me the different models associated with my website that I registered. So I could click on trip categories, and if you notice what it does on the name, it adds an S to it. It pluralizes it. This was just trip category, customer, destination. So you might want to be careful what you name these things, knowing it's just going to add an S. And categories, yeah, that probably should be IES. We're not going to worry about it. I can add a record to trip categories, description. And we could say Safari is the category, save. We now have a record under trip category. I could add another one. We could say a cruise, save. Destinations, add. Right here, we have no destinations, but I could either click add or add right here. What's the category? It's a safari. The title will be African 10 days. Something to that effect. We could save it. Notice I try to save and it says you have to enter this information, and that's because the model required it. Let's go ahead and come back over to here, and we're not going to add that record. Go back to trip categories, and let's say that we didn't want those trip categories. We wanted different trip categories. So we could say, let's take a look at this trip category and let's delete it. Yes, I'm sure. Delete. Yes, I'm sure. I didn't even write any code to do that. The admin did it for you. Go ahead and add trip categories for each of our locations. We'll say the description is Africa, and add another trip category. It'll be Asia, save and add another. Europe, save and add another. Australia, save and add another. North America, save and add another. And South America, save. Now, before I continue, I want you to download and extract some images back in the practice area. And those images are going to represent each of the different destinations. In the beginning of the 21st chapter's practice section, you'll want to download this material. And when you download that zip file, you're going to extract that zip file, and there's going to be some pictures in it. And those pictures are going to be different pictures representing each of our travel destinations. And by the way, two of these pictures were downloaded from Unsplash, which are free photos that you can download on the web. And a special thanks to Chad Taylor for his picture of the Great Barrier Reef, and David Claude for his picture of an African safari. These others, thanks to Gina Anderson for her picture of Hawaii and the Great Wall, Mount Arenal volcano in Costa Rica, and Stonehenge. And so you're going to want to take those files, copy those files, and I've already done this, but I'll show you how you can do it. Copy those files, and then you'll just drag them to your image folder, and that'll copy the system over. Now make sure it's the image inside of static, inside of this actual my travel static. So we want to put them inside of there. So I'll copy them. In fact, I can put them in both of those two sites just to make sure I have them. One was done by Collect Static, which is this one, and the other is within my travel project images. And there's our images. Now that we have those images, we can work with our admin site a little bit more. So what we want to do is let's go ahead and go back to our website. I'm going to cancel this terminal window. Let's run it one more time and say Python manage.py run server. We'll access the web page, and we're going to access admin. And this already came to this screen because we were already logged in before. We never clicked on log out. So now I can come to destinations. I already have categories. I can go to destinations, add a new destination, and trip category, we'll do Africa. We'll put safari, number of days, 10 days, the cost, $10,000. Choose a file, and let's go grab one of those files that we downloaded, and you can really grab them from anywhere on your system. I'm going to go ahead and I'll just grab them from even download. Click open. Is active. What day would they leave? They would leave Christmas Day. Go ahead and save, and we can add another one. Add another destination. Let's do Asia. We'll put Great Wall, number of days 5, the cost $5,000. Of course, I'm just making all this up. And we'll choose the Great Wall, open that, and choose the leave date will be January 20th. Save and add another. Let's do Europe, and we'll put where we want to go in Europe, and we will go ahead and choose Ireland, and specifically Stonehenge. Number of days, that'll be 7 days, it'll be $4,000. We'll choose the Stonehenge image, and just choosing days, save and add another. We're going to do one for each record. Australia, and we'll say Great Barrier Reef. That'll be 9 days, $7,000. Choose file. Our Great Barrier Reef with our sea turtle. That'll be March 16th. Save and add another. We'll do North America. This will be Kauai. 4 days. The cost will be $1,500. Choose file. Here is the Kauai picture. We're just adding these for each of the different images. That'll be December 31st. Add the last one will be South America. We'll do Costa Rica. Number of days 8. 3,500. Choose file. We'll choose Mount Arenal. And that leave date will be February 18th. Save. So now we have all of our categories in, our destinations in. You can look at customers now, And by the way, back on the destinations, if I tried to add another destination and I chose Africa and just typed anything in on Africa, tried to do a save, it says you've already got a destination with this category. And that's because we said it's a one-to-one relationship, meaning one destination can have one category can have one destination. Now, if you were really going to do this in the real world, in a real travel agency, you'd want that to be probably a one-to-many relationship rather than a one-to-one. I just wanted you to see what would happen if you do choose one-to-one. Then you only get one category per destination and one destination per category. Let's go ahead and look at the customers. We'll add a customer, and the first name will be John, last name Doe, username will be John Doe, password will be test, email test@test.com, phone number 801-555-1212, and then you can choose what destination they want to go to. This button allows you to add more destinations. We'll say John's going to go to Kauai. We add that. Notice what happened to his name. This name right here, that's the value that's being used from this function right here. That method in the class says return the full name, which says return the first name and the last name in that value. And notice when we went to save the record, it uppercased the first and the last name. So if I went back and looked at the customer again, you're going to see that was uppercased. So that's why we like to make our models have a lot of information in them, because they can help us control how we work with the data. And this is how you can actually use the admin with the models, creating a super user, and then you can actually start adding data to your website. You can view the site, you can change the password, you can log out. So we're going to go ahead and log out, and that logs out of the website, and we'll stop the terminal from running. And that's how you can work with the admin and add images in the database. And our next sample, when we start to work with database relationships, we'll learn how to display images and how to get data.